So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this virtual program hosted by the Needham Free Public Library. We are delighted tonight to present Bob Began, a longtime speaker here at the library who has a fascinating talk tonight on the race to the pole. So without further ado, continue onward, Mr. Began.
Thank you, Gail. Okay, so this is a cold February night, and we've got a little bit of snow on the ground, but it's probably not bad compared to some other places, namely Antarctica. Antarctica, it's the fifth largest continent. It's larger than Europe, it's larger than North America. 98% of it is covered in ice. This ice contains 90% of the world's fresh water. It's the thickest ice in the world, more than 15,000 feet thick. Coldest temperature ever recorded, minus 129 degrees in 1983. Now in the winter, the mean temperatures range from 40 below to 94 below. Some is much nicer, +5 to -30. The further you go inland, the more rapidly the temperature drops. It's got the highest elevation of all continents. Average elevation, 7,500 feet. North America, by contrast, average elevation is 2,300 feet. Closest land is South America, 600 miles. Australia, 1,550. Africa, 2,500 miles. Antarctica is separated from other continents by the Southern Ocean. Strong westerly winds prevailed. And since there's no landmass, storms chase each other. Sailors cite the roaring 40s and the furious 50s for fast passages. Storms are ever present. No indigenous people, minimal wildlife except near the coastal area, no gold, no silver, no raw materials. The inner portions are completely unknown, and brutal weather is a constant. So you have to ask, why would anybody want to go there? What value could this forbidden land possibly hold? And why would men willingly risk their lives to go there? Well, for the answers, let's go back to the 1900s. The concept of empire. The concept of empire is always looming in the background. In 1900, the British Empire was one of the largest, if not the largest, in the world. The saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Here's a map showing the various colonies and possessions of the empire. Now, if you want to run a very, very successful empire, here's who might do a good job running it. This is Queen Victoria. She ran the empire brilliantly. England had a thirst for land, for empire. It was an ongoing issue. Now, she wasn't the only country to have this, but she felt that it was an obligation to bring civilization and the benefits of modern science and culture and trade to other areas of the world that were not so fortunate. And she would do this in a number of ways, by trade, by the Bible, or by the gun, or sometimes by a combination of all three. In 1900, Antarctica represented the last unclaimed area and unexplored area of the world. Oh, here's a picture in India, just showing you the pomp and circumstance of the British Empire. This gentleman is named Sir Clement Markham. He's the head of the Royal Geographic Society. He's an English explorer. He's traveled in India, Peru, Abyssinia, the Arctic. He is determined that Antarctica be claimed by the British Empire. He assigns a top priority to the Royal Geographic Society to form an expedition to Antarctica. Feels very, very strongly the leadership should be under the leadership of a British Navy officer, a Royal Navy officer. He thinks that scientists have value, but as a secondary role. Markham says, a dash to the pole is not what I advocate, nor do I believe it is what British science desires. It demands rather a steady, continuous, laborious, and systematic exploration of the whole southern region with all the appliances of the modern investigator. This exploration should be undertaken by the Royal Navy. He has another viewpoint that is firmly established. He says, for long, tough journeys, fit, trained, and disciplined young men hauling sledges are far more reliable than dogs. He feels dogs are okay as a backup. Now, there's one other group that would be in contention or competition against the Royal Geographic Society, and that's the Royal Society. And the Royal Society was basically scientists, technical people, not so much explorers, not so much discoverers. And they will clash with Markham as to see who's going to get control of this expedition, if there is to be an expedition. Well, Markham prevails, and he selects this man, Robert Falcon Scott. He's just the fellow for it. Strong, steady, genial, scientific, a good head on his shoulders, and he's a very, very good officer. Markham is determined that a naval officer will head this expedition, and he also insists that he's got to be young. Well, Scott's the pick. He comes from a modest family. At age 13, he joins the Royal Navy, becomes a midshipman, and then a lieutenant. Scott is always concerned with finances, and he sees the Navy as a means of ascending to a higher class with chances for fame and glory. Markham feels Scott has all the qualities needed to lead an expedition. In 1900, Scott becomes leader of the National Antarctic Expedition. This expedition is going to have a scientific focus under naval leadership. It's going to study meteorology, oceanography, geology, biology, and magnetism. Scott selects members to go on the journey. Ernest Shackleton, a merchant marine officer, very, very capable mariner. He also selects a doctor, Edward Wilson. Here's Shackleton. Here's Wilson. Wilson would become one of the most inspirational and respected members of the expedition. Everybody would value his presence. Scott would claim the finest character I've ever met. Shackleton was from the Merchant Navy. Scott is the Royal Navy. So there's a little bit of friction, a little bit of resentment there. They will spar occasionally, but they will work together. They get together the crew, which is going to be total complement will be 47 men. A lot of them will be merchant seamen, Royal Navy sailors, below decks men, officers. There'll be some merchant seamen. There'll be some doctors and some scientists. They're going to plan the expedition. This is going to be the vessel they're going to take. But shaking the tree to get the money is difficult at first. The government doesn't jump into this wholeheartedly, but the corporate sector does. Cadbury Corporation, the chocolate people, they gave 3,500 pounds of cocoa and chocolate. Coleman's, the flour company, donates 9 tons of flour. Burberry, clothing people, they donate windproof clothing. Provisions, she's going to take 1,800 pounds of tobacco, 27 gallons of whiskey, brandy, port, lime juice, 150 tons of roast pheasant, 500 tons of roast turkey, Stilton and double Gloucester cheese, candied orange peel. They're going to be gone for 2 years anyway. They're going to have a lot of provisions. They're going to go in the vessel pictured here. It's the Discovery. She was built specifically for this expedition. 172 foot long, 34-foot beam. The sides are 26 inches thick. She has a steel-plated bow. Some of the bolts holding together the frame are 8.5 feet long. She also has 2 coal-fired boilers. They will generate a total of 500 horsepower. She displaces 1,620 tons. August the 1st, the Discovery is hosting dignitaries prior to her departure. King Edward VII gives a brief speech. The Queen's Pekingese falls overboard, but is rescued. Discovery heads to the Antarctic. Markham says, "No finer set of men ever left these shores, nor were men ever led by a finer captain." It's slow traveling at best. She's going 7 knots. She's leaking like a sieve. The pumps are getting clogged with coal dust that require constant manning. Storms are causing the cargo to shift. The food for the dogs is being damaged. She left August 1st. On October the 3rd, she reaches Cape Town. The crew, the officers, the scientists, they're treated like rock stars. They're like celebrities. Everybody turns out to visit them, to see them, to wish them well. They re-provision. November, they head south. Again, severe storms, Discovery's rolling constantly, the dogs are suffering, the leaks continue. She arrives in Lyttelton, New Zealand, I'm sorry. Again, she draws a tremendous crowd. Everybody wishes her well. I mean, these are the days of the empire. This is the British flag flying from the mast. Tremendous amount of pride in being part of the British Empire. December the 21st, she leaves New Zealand. January the 5th, 1902, she clears the ice pack. She approaches the Ross ice shelf. Basically, the Ross ice shelf and McMurdo Sound, this area in the gray is going to be where things are going to be. Basically, the camp will be set up. It'll be the operating base. She cleared the ice pack January 5th. January 23rd, the crew is getting used to the terrain. They set up quarters on the Ross ice shelf. They send out sledging parties to explore the area. The initial results are poor. The English are not good at using dogs. The quality of the dogs is also suspect. Greenland dogs were the best. These dogs were Russian. All the good dogs were taken up in the Arctic exploration. They're a motley crew. Scott has a sentimental feeling toward dogs and ponies. And again, this is his philosophy that will stay with him forever. Quote, "In my mind, no sentimental feelings toward dogs and ponies. In my mind, no journey ever made with dogs can approach the height of that fine conception which is realized when a party of men go forth to face their hardships, dangers, and difficulties with their own unaided efforts, and by days and weeks of hard physical labor succeed in solving some problem of the unknown. Surely, in this case, the conquest is more nobly and splendidly won." So what he's saying is, men working together, working hard for weeks is guaranteed to lead towards a more noble and splendid ending. So they're spending their time sending out sledging parties. This is the ice shelf, 200 feet tall. It's absolutely forbidding. They are sending out parties on top. They need to get used to the terrain. And there are mistakes made. This is a classic mistake. They brought this hydrogen balloon alongside on the journey. And in February, both Scott and Shackleton go up into the balloon. They go as high as 800 feet to see what they can see. This might not have been the smartest use of expedition talent. The good news is they ran out of fuel and they couldn't do this anymore. Part of the learning curve, sending out parties, sledge parties. Here's a hard lesson learned. March 11th, the sledge party gets caught in a blizzard. Rather than wait out the storm, the men head back to camp. They think they know how to get back there. They're coming down a real steep slope and they're slipping and they're falling. The visibility is just about nil. And the man leading the group, there's 7 of them, the man leading the group all of a sudden realizes if he takes a couple more steps, he will walk right off the cliff and directly into the ocean. So he screams and he hollers to the men behind him, stop, stop. Well, they all do, except one guy doesn't. His name is George Vince, and he just walks right off and they never see him again. Other lessons learned. Don't underestimate the weather. Don't overestimate capabilities. In other words, distances are extremely misleading. The food, the sledges are not packed correctly. In other words, in a storm, if a blizzard comes up, you want your tent, you want your shelter equipment, you want the things you need packed on top, not on the bottom. And these are hard lessons, but they really haven't had any past experience. So it's the cost of learning what you're doing. The dogs is still a problem. Sometimes they pull, sometimes they don't. Frostbite is a problem. Is a typical sledge team. The dogs are the key to success in Antarctica. And the British never seem to grasp that logic. Base camp, they're setting up the base camp in Hut Point. They're living comfortably. They're waiting for the winter to be over. The scientists, they do their testing. They're measuring all sorts of conditions. They're doing the research. The men are getting used to the cold. They're getting better at sledging. They're getting better with the dogs. But there's always room for improvement. At night, they have relaxation. There are debates, Tennyson versus Browning, lectures, classes, skits, sing-songs, all in all, a congenial bunch. They even have a paper, the South Polar Times. It's edited by Shackleton. Anybody could submit an article. Scott is planning a run to the pole. They're waiting for the warm weather to come. The sun appears in August. The plan is to set up these supply depots that they can position en route to the pole and also on the return trip. They also have to realize that this is something they're dealing with, which is frostbite. This is a fellow's hand. It shows you how swollen and blistered they are. But they're getting acclimated to it. November the 2nd, Scott, Wilson, and Shackleton, the 3 men set off. They're headed for the pole. They get a good start. but then problems ensue. Warmer weather causes tough going in the melted snow. The dogs are lethargic, blizzards hamper the progress, hunger and snow blindness are bothering the men. They left November the 2nd. By December the 20th, only 14 of the 19 dogs are left. Scurvy is starting to appear on the dogs and Shackleton. December 30th, they are at their furthest point south, 82 degrees and 16 minutes. They have to turn back. They're spent, and they know they can't continue to go on. They finally reach the ship February the 3rd. Shackleton has scurvy. Wilson has a mild case. Scott has scurvy. Shackleton is sent home. He's sent back, and this is based upon the medical opinion of Dr. Wilson and another physician. Shackleton will always resent this. He will always hold this against Scott for being sent home prematurely. He thought he would be fine. Here is a constant danger: crevasses. During the next winter, teams are sent out to explore and find an inland route to the pole. Armitage is like a junior officer. He leads a team up and he discovers a glacier, the Ferrar Glacier. They haul the sledges up this glacier to an altitude of 9,000 feet. And crevasses are one of the constant dangers. One man falls 27 feet in one, but he is rescued. They find specimens of fossil plants. They find a skeleton of a seal at an altitude 8,000 feet, 30 miles from the sea. So this is opening up all sorts of questions from a scientific and geological aspect. Scott takes another team up the glacier. Armitage, the guy that went up there the first time, kind of resents Scott. He thinks Scott's trying to outdo him. Scott leaves October the 26th. He reaches the summit November 13th, temperature minus 40 degrees. On the trip home, Scott falls into a crevasse. They finally get back to the Discovery, Christmas Day, 1903. They've been gone for 59 days. They covered 725 miles. 59 days is 59 days of wearing the exact same clothing. It is sleeping in a tent with two other men with a constant buildup of ice on the inside walls of the tent from the condensation. It means some days you were stuck in your tent and you can't get out of it because you have to wait out the blizzard. I can't fathom how they could do it. They all do it. They all get home on this trip. February 1904, the ship breaks free from the ice. She arrives back in London, September 1904. Markham is thrilled. He is elated. He says, never before has any polar expedition returned with so great a harvest of scientific results. Scott soars to fame. He's invited to many banquets. He can see, he could write a book and that could generate a fair amount of money. This could be an avenue towards promotion. This might be leading him to a much better fiscal and social position. He's the host of many, many parties. He really is feeling well. Shackleton is determined to go back and reach the pole. he just cannot bear the thought of Scott doing it, or for that matter, anybody else. There's always a polite rivalry between Scott and Shackleton, and it never really explodes. It's always kind of simmering. But Shackleton was much better at getting money, at getting backing. And so he decides he's going to organize an expedition to Antarctica in 1907. This is the advertisement. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Ernest Shackleton, 4 Burlington Street. Supposedly, he had 3 categories that he placed the men he interviewed in. One of them was insane. One of them was not sure. And the third category was might be okay. What Shackleton always stressed, he looked for somebody who was positive. He looked for somebody who was optimistic. He would have nothing to do with naysayers. August the 7th. Oh, by the way, over 400 men applied for that position. August the 7th, his ship, the Nimrod, leaves England. Again, they stop off in Lyttelton, New Zealand. Over 30,000 people are there cheering them and welcoming them, wishing them luck. His ship, the Nimrod, he has his ship towed 1,500 miles to save fuel. They left August 7th. They arrive in Antarctica. They clear the ice pack in February of 1908. They set up the camp. This is the actual building. It's called Hut Point. 15 men live in a hut, 33 feet by 19 feet. Send out exploration parties on the sledge parties. The men are just waiting for the winter to be over. October 29th, Shackleton, Eric Marshall, Frank Wild, and Jameson Adams, 4 of them, they head for the pole. October 29th. November the 26th, almost a month later, they pass Scott's furthest point south. Crevasses, a continual danger. Hunger is a huge problem. The ponies they have some ponies with them. They're being killed for food. Blizzards, they stay in tents for days. Headwinds are slowing them down. January the 9th, they reach their furthest point south, 88 degrees, 23 minutes. They are now 99 miles from the pole. March the 1st, they reach the safety of the ship. They have traveled 1,700 miles. They've been gone 128 days. Shackleton is the second from the left. They're just hazard looking. They've been through so much. They head back to England. June, Shackleton returns to London. He is knighted by King Edward VII. He gets an award of 20,000 pounds. He loves the publicity, plans on selling his story. He's giving lectures. He was knighted by King Edward VII. Scott was not, and that was kind of a snub to Scott, but be that as it may. So you've got Scott, who's just kind of waiting for another opportunity, or thinking he might want to try another shot at it. He sees the acclaim and the reception that Shackleton's getting. He says, "That's it. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back." The rivalry between Shackleton and Scott is something that is always lurking. Scott is at a dinner honoring Shackleton in June of 1909. And he just makes the decision then and there. He's going to plan another trip to Antarctica. Well, we got another guy here, Roald Amundsen. He's a Norwegian. Norway feels strongly about exploring the pole. Amundsen was actually an Arctic explorer, very, very capable cold weather guy. And he was disappointed that he didn't get to the North Pole. And he's been planning on going to the South Pole. Here he is, born 1872. He's just a no nonsense, all ahead full type guy. His whole approach is basically, okay, we're going to go to the pole. We're not going to pick up rocks. We're not going to do research. We're not going to look for plants. We're going to go to the pole and we're going to come back. That's his whole approach. The other approach that he has is he has absolutely no problem, no qualms at all over pushing the dogs to their limit, doing whatever he has to do or his men have to do to get the dogs to pull. A key belief of his is that dogs are the most effective means of hauling. He's unsympathetic to his dogs. Upon seeing his dogs killed, he remarks, "Great masses of beautiful fresh red meat. Delicate little cutlets had a hypnotizing effect. Another dose of the whip convinced them to do as we wished." So you contrast that with, again, not to be redundant, but Scott's thoughts. He felt that men who would use dogs to their end and then cook and eat them was beyond emulation. One cannot calmly contemplate murder of animals who possess intelligence and individuality, who have become friends and companions. When other dogs eagerly ate their dead, Scott was appalled. Amundsen heads south, August 9th, 1910. He's got 97 dogs and supplies for 2 years. September the 9th, he sends Scott a telegram. And this is the first announcement that he's going to the pole. And he says, "Beg leave inform you, proceeding Antarctic, Amundsen." January 15th, 1911, he sets up a base camp. It's at the Bay of Whales. This camp he sets up is 60 miles closer to the pole than Scott's starting point. In April, they're waiting for the weather to turn. Camp life is good. They have strict routines to keep the men busy. And that's something all of these expeditions had. They all had activities for the men to keep them busy. Now, at night, there was leisure time, but discipline was actually, their plans worked. There was very little discipline issued because everybody was busy, and everybody, far and away, when you think about the close quarters and the length of time these guys are together, I've done a fair amount of reading on this stuff, and there's very, very little record or documentation of friction. Everybody really was on the same page, and everybody got along. It was amazing. So they're getting ready. The Norwegians are getting ready to run to the pole in September. Now, the English are all there also, Scott's other journey. And they are just 50 miles away, and they visit the Norwegian camp, and they're cordial, but everything's very, very guarded. November the 4th, the Norwegians are at their last depot. They're going 20 miles a day. They're going to reach the mountains. Their plan is, once they get to the mountains on the glacier, take enough food for 30 days and bring as many dogs as we have. Once you get on top, kill most of the dogs for food. November 21st, they reach the top. 10,000-foot elevation. December the 8th, they pass Shackleton's furthest point south. These guys always know what their predecessors or their competitors did. And it's a huge driving force with them to make sure they can at least beat the other guy. December the 8th, they pass Shackleton's furthest point south. December the 14th, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they reach the pole. They name it Polheim. They put up a tent with a letter for King Haakon, King of Norway, and a note for Scott. Here's a picture of the Norwegians. They're all clean shaven. This is in their camp. Here's Amundsen taken at the pole. Here's the tent they left. And here are the 4 men that were on the run. Now, Scott's second journey. Oh, so they did that March 7th, 1912. Amundsen's on his way home, and he sends a cable to his brother announcing success. And you have to bear in mind, communication is non-existent or weeks or even months behind the actual date things happen. He sends this cable in March, mentions he succeeded. The English reaction is furious. They consider him a cad. They consider him underhanded. Amundsen resents these ill feelings. He all his life feels he never got the proper recognition that he wanted. Scott's second journey to Antarctica. This is his ship. It's the Terra Nova. It's June 1st, 1910. They leave England. In October, they pick up 34 dogs, 19 ponies, and 3 tractors. November, fierce storms, 55-mile-an-hour winds, 45-foot seas. They're taking on water, cargo's shifting. They lose 10 tons of coal. January 1911, they reach Cape Evans, McMurdo Sound. They're setting up sledge runs. They're establishing supply depots. Again, problems. The dogs won't work. The ponies are floundering in the snow. Here are some of the horses. The quarters on this ship, let alone all the dogs and all the horses. This fellow is, his name is Oates. He's in charge of the horses. He's from, well, he was a soldier in the Empire. He is extremely controlling over his horses. And for example, they made small sets of horseshoes that the ponies could use that actually helped the ponies in the snow. Oates didn't think they were correct or they were proper, or he just didn't go for it. And they didn't use them. And Scott will kind of felt bad. He says, it is trying to feel that so great a help to our effort has been left behind. But this was Oates, a very, very strong personality, honest man, and close to Scott, but no snowshoes for the ponies. Here's another loyal man. His name is Bowers. Bowers is he's a good guy. Everybody liked him. This is his horse. He was close to Scott. One of the team members. This is the pennant. Markham, Sir Clement Markham, was adamant that every officer should have a pennant, his family crest or his family pennant for his sledge. And this is Markham's pennant. And it shows an arrow going through the thigh of a person. One of Markham's great ancestors was apparently an archer. The English do love heraldry. Here they are. Life at the camp in the evening. I mean, these men did not go hungry. There were all sorts of good meals and a lot of relaxation. Scott is at the head of the table, and they're just waiting. They're just waiting for the weather to lighten up. By the way, the tractors, they unloaded the first tractor. They had three of them. They unloaded the first tractor. They've got it on the ice. They unload the second tractor, and that simply sinks and crashes right through the ice and sinks to the bottom. The tractors never worked. Scott's plan in November: go across the ice shelf, go up to the Beardmore Glacier. The glacier was named the Beardmore Glacier after one of the key donors for Shackleton's expedition. So they're going to go up to the plateau. They're going to have man-hauling teams to go to the pole and back. They've decided this. Well, until they get up to the plateau, the ponies are going lame. The dogs are not pulling. But Scott refuses to kill any pony or any dog before they reach the point where Shackleton killed his first animals. The blizzards are slowing the progress. January 3rd, they reach the plateau. They left at the beginning of November. January 3rd, they reach the plateau. They have 150 miles to go. Scott, Evans, Wilson, and Oates, these four men are going to go to the pole. At the last minute, Scott picks Bowers to go, because Bowers was a good, loyal man. And people have always questioned this decision. For one thing, you take and you divide your rations, your fuel, your supplies by 5 instead of 4. And this decision will haunt Scott and all of them. January the 17th, they reach the pole. They see the flag, the Norwegian tent. Here's a picture of them. I mean, they are just absolutely spent. All their efforts, all their trials, and they see the note from Amundsen. Scott is totally demoralized. He says, "Great God, this is an awful place." They're heading home. They're trying to reach the depots, supply depots for supplies. Food is running short. Paraffin is the fuel they used for the stoves. That's running low. It's the little things that bite you sometimes. The Norwegians used paraffin for their stoves. Their paraffin was in tin cans with a screw-on cap. The British had their paraffin in tin cans with a cork cover, a cork cap. Well, in the cold weather, the cork shrinks and it allows some of the fuel to evaporate. So when they go to grab a fresh container, it could be as little as half full or maybe a third full. They're running out of fuel. Evans is sick. Wilson is sick. He's suffering from real severe leg pains. Oates, the guy in charge of the horses, has gangrene in his feet. February the 17th, they've been on the trail for a month. Evans dies. March 16th, they're still struggling to get back. Oates is unable to bear the pain. He says, I'm just going outside and maybe sometime. And he walks out into a blizzard. Here's a painting that portrays him. March 21st. They're still 11 miles from from the final camp. They know they're dying. Scott writes final letters. Had we lived, I should have had a tale to tell of the hardihood, courage, and endurance of my companions, which would have stirred the hearts of every Englishman. They are stuck in the tent for 8 days due to blizzards and loss of strength. March 29th, Scott. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write any more. For God's sake, look after our people. March 29th was the last entry. Their bodies were found November 12th, 1912, in this cairn that was, they built a cairn commemorating the people that found the bodies. February 1913, Kathleen Scott, Scott's wife, is on a steamer. She's going to New Zealand to meet him. She gets word of his death. Her reaction, it is, she maintains composure, keeps a stiff upper lip, goes to lunch, discusses politics, and reads newspaper accounts of the loss of the Titanic. In England, February the 14th, a memorial service for Scott and his men at St. Paul's Cathedral. George V attends. Commoners are allowed inside. That same day, they estimated 1.5 million school children listening to tales of Scott. In death, he's transformed into a hero representing sacrifice, courage, and service to king and country. He is a perfect example of a gallant English gentleman. He becomes an icon of English qualities. Here's the map. You can see the red line was the route Amundsen took. You can see the green line, the Beardmore Glacier. And then they head up. Otis died on the 17th. Scott, Wilson, and Bowers about the 30th. This was a publication memorializing Scott's Antarctic expedition. He really was elevated to iconic status. This is a ship. It's the Endurance. It's Shackleton's ship. It is locked in the ice. He has decided he wants to make another run to Antarctica. It will be the Imperial Trans-Antarctica Expedition. He will take his ship and his crew. They will land, they will head to the pole, and another ship will be meeting, another party will be meeting them from the other end of the pole. It'll be the first trans-Antarctic expedition. World War I is imminent. August 8th, the Endurance leaves England. December the 5th, she leaves South Georgia Island. She crosses the Antarctic Circle on December the 31st. She gets stuck in the ice, the pack ice. And Shackleton realizes both the crew and the shore party are stuck together as the ship becomes trapped in the ice and she's drifting further and further from land. May 1st, 1915, the sun disappears. He sets up routines to stave off boredom, lectures, sing-songs, chess, taking care of the dogs. Everybody gets along quite well in spite of class differences, he says. He could mix with the men easily. He could be one of the boys. He was fair and respected. He would ask nothing of his men that he would not do. As a result, his orders were always carried out quickly. Nothing happened without his knowledge. He could be tough when he had to. He was a superb judge of men. He was a tremendous optimist. He looked for that trait in all of his men. Optimism is the true form of courage. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of every man under his command, and they were from every corner of the empire. India, Burma, Malaya, Australia, Egypt. June the 15th, she's still trapped in the ice, now 670 miles from land. The pressure is building on the ship, and Shackleton realizes she might be lost. What the ice gets, it keeps, he says. October, pressure's building. October 26th, the deck is buckling. She's got a 30-degree list. Here she is trapped in the ice. This is just on board the ship. It's just, they're taking it easy. You always had a fire watch, but it was a place to swap stories and yarns and just to relax and have a smoke. Here's the Endurance. She's stuck in the ice. These photographs are in the book titled Endurance. They are absolutely beautiful photographs. Here she is. She's leaning over. She's buckling, got a 30-degree list. The men have to take as much as they can get off the ship. And they're unloading everything. Everything of any possible use is unloaded. While they're doing this, a line of 8 penguins marches up next to the ship. They're all in a line, and they're all looking at the ship. And in unison, they all flip their head backwards, and they let out this eerie cry. And one of the men on the ship says, "Did you hear that? None of us will get back." October the 26th at 5 o'clock, abandoned ship. Shackleton is the last one to leave. They hoist the blue ensign, 3 cheers by the crew. There was an emergency light on the stern and it was still flickering. They're 350 miles from land. Temperature is minus 15. Here are the dogs just looking. Everything is gone. He sets up camp. It's called Ocean Camp. They're getting ready to take to the boats. His first plan is, we'll take the boats, we'll load them with supplies, and we'll haul them overland to Hut Point. Well, they try that, and it does not work. Shackleton says, well, the ship's gone, our stores are gone, so now we'll go home. We're going to take to the boats. Each man was only allowed a few possessions. We're going to dump everything. Gold sovereigns, watch, left, and his watch are left on the ice. This is a fellow named Crean. He's worth his weight in gold, a good, solid guy. He will kill all the puppies. This young man was a stowaway. He was discovered 3 days out from New Zealand, and Shackleton agreed to take him on board. He turned out to be good. The cat was the mascot. The cat was known as Mrs. Chippy. Mrs. Chippy was shot by him. Actually, Mrs. Chippy turned out to be Mr. Chippy, but that doesn't take away from the story. Shackleton takes the 23rd Psalm. He takes some readings from Job, and he says, we've got to head. We've got to go to the boats. We've got to head to South Georgia Island. Now, there's a carpenter named McNish. McNish is, he's a tough guy. Yeah, ship's carpenters in those days always were tough to deal with because they felt they were irreplaceable and they knew they had good skills and everything. Well, McNish challenges Shackleton's authority, which is a huge mistake. He says, we don't have to follow your orders because the ship is sunk. Shackleton reads the ship's articles and he tells the men, you will be paid until you reach a safe port. This is one of the 3 boats they have. It's the James Caird. And it was named after one of the very, very wealthy donors named James Caird. It was a 22.5-foot boat. They have to leave the ice floe that they're on because it's shrinking. They don't have any more, they have no more outlets. So Shackleton says, we're going to take everything we can and we're going to head to Elephant Island. And then from Elephant Island, I'll leave some of you men on Elephant Island and I will go to South Georgia Island, which is the nearest habitated island. There's a big whaling station there, and he knows that there are people there. They've been trapped in the ice for 15 months. April the 9th, they take to the boats. They spend 7 days in the boats, cold, miserable, wet, blizzard, huge waves. They finally reach solid ground. They have a chance to have hot meals, but morale is sagging and they're starting to really grumble. So Shackleton calls a meeting and he tells them one boat will go to South Georgia. South Georgia Island is 800 miles away. The winds are up to 80 miles per hour. The waves are 60 feet high and the lifeboat is 22 and a half feet long. Here they make it to Elephant Island. That was a picture of Elephant Island back there. That's the kind of rough terrain they hope to get to. This is going to be the crew. Shackleton will be the skipper. Worsley is the navigator. Crean is just a solid, Crean's the top left. This fellow on the top right is, his name is Vincent, last name is Vincent. He is nothing but bad news. He's a bully and he's always a problem. And rather than leave him on the island for somebody else to manage, Shackleton brings him. McNish is the guy with the hat on in the bottom right. And McCarthy is just a good solid guy. But typical of Shackleton's style, he would not leave a problem for somebody else to handle. So the boat heads off to South Georgia Island. They will spend 16 days in heaving waters. The crew maintains this rigid schedule of watch, routine, and chain of command. They have nothing but horrible weather. They go 48 hours without water. Finally, May the 7th, they reach land. And they sight land on May 7th, and they land the next day. This map shows South Georgia Island. They come in from the left, and where the map says this landfall, and Cape Demidov. They can't, the tides are too much for them to try to land in there, so they have to stand off, and then they come in to this point, but it's still rough as they bear off, and they finally come into King Haakon Bay. So they get to the bay. Shackleton leaves 2 men there to rest. And he and Crean and Worsley set out for the whaling station, which is over in Stromness Bay at the right. And so they have to go across this series of mountains. And there are 3 peaks that they could possibly summit and go down to the other side. Well, the first peak they get to, it's too steep. The second peak is equally dangerous. They get to the 3rd peak and it looks like it might work. And what they do is they basically tie a rope to each other and the 3 of them slide down the snow until they get to an even ground. They then hike across to Stromness Bay. And on May the 20th, they rest for a couple days. They rest for 2 days. On May the 20th, Shackleton reaches the whaling station. They can't believe he made it. They can't believe he's alive. Here's another example of the map. Had they look at the very left end of the island, if they if they're too far to the left of the island, the currents will drive them all the way up straight. So they have to come in here, basically heading into what King Haakon Bay. And then from there, they cut across. Shackleton's there for 3 days. On the 23rd of May, he leaves, headed for Elephant Island to rescue the other men. They can't get near him, the ice. The ice keeps the men on Elephant Island, or keeps them from being rescued until August 30th, 1916, they are rescued. Shackleton sends a letter to his wife. I have done it. Damn the Admiralty. Not a life lost, and we have been through hell. They make it home. This is South Georgia Island. These pictures were taken, I think, a couple of years ago. One of the people I gave this talk to gave me these pictures. And here's the map. Again, over here, they're drifting on the ice. The ship sinks right here. They head off to this small island as an option. They get to Elephant Island, and then from Elephant Island to South Georgia, 24 April to 10 May. Unbelievable. Huge. I mean, this is just, I can't fathom how they could spend 16, 17 days in an open boat and then they got to climb over these mountains. Unbelievable. Here's a picture of the men being rescued on Elephant Island. So when they get home, what are they walking into? World War I is raging. England is hemorrhaging bodies. It is total collapse of the order in the world. It's brutal losses. Some of these men with Shackleton, particularly those, I mean, they were in the Navy. A navigator, last name was Pennell. He's a navigator on the Queen Mary, a British battleship. He's lost at sea. Others are lost at sea or lost serving the Empire. And nobody really cares about Antarctic exploration. Shackleton will issue a medal to every one of his men, except McNish, the carpenter. You never question his authority, and he would never forgive anybody that would. After the war, he has this burning desire to go back to Antarctica. And he does go back. He has a heart attack and he dies and he's buried at the St. George's Island. That is my story about the polar expeditions, the race to the South Pole. Thank you for your patience. So, Gay Ellen?
So Bob, what you need to do now is stop sharing screen.
Stop sharing it?
Yep.
Okay. There we go.
There you go.
I love technology.
So if anybody has any questions, you can either raise your hand or put it right into the chat window. I do want to thank everyone for coming. If you take a look at the chat, you'll see upcoming programs that the library will be sponsoring, including Bob coming back next month, this time to talk about the Mutiny on the Bounty.
Is it the Bounty?
It's the Bounty.
I thought it was Lawrence of Arabia.
Nope, you already given me Lawrence of Arabia. It is going to be Mutiny on the Bounty.
These pesky details.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mutiny on the Bounty is a great story. Oh, by the way, I look and I see Susan Walton from the United Kingdom. Susan.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
I'm sitting in bed because it's 1 o'clock in the morning here.
Well, my God, I can't believe I kept you up that late.
No, I was delighted,
Well,
delighted. I mean, one of the things that strikes me about, this British thing, they were so proud of being British, they weren't practical at times, like, as you say, like the dogs, the clothing, the
yes.
tog rating of the clothing was very poor
Yeah.
compared to Amundson's, who use furs,
Well, I'll tell you, they were undaunted though. And I just can't, when you think about it, 1,700 miles, 59 days living in the tent, at night when they would be in the tent, there'd be 3 men to a tent. And you had, on one of the earlier journeys, you had Scott, Shackleton, and Wilson, and they would read from Darwin's Origin of Species, whatever it takes to get you through the night.
So thank you very much, Bob.
I think. Anyway, they had cameras, all things considered, these expeditions brought back tons of scientific information. I mean, it really opened up huge amounts of, research and technology, research and scientific avenues. So, Wilson, the one guy that nobody could ever find fault with was Wilson. He was just a prince. He was wonderful. He was thorough. He was dedicated. He was dragging 35 pounds of rock samples on the return home when he died. And he was just completely dedicated. Wilson was a really good guy. I love how they used to keep diaries and journals in those days. They were just, that's how you know what they thought,
So Bob, I do have a question from Steve Schusterman. He wanted to know, how on the first trip was Shackleton sent home?
How was he?
How on that first trip, how was he sent home?
Oh, well, there was another vessel.
Okay.
Yeah, the Discovery. A little bit of a controversy there. Markham, Scott, what the world did not know was the Discovery and the crew were actually in good health and good standings, but they made a decision to send another rescue ship. I forget the name of it, but they had another ship go to rescue them, and Scott took issue with it. He said, basically in so many words, he said, "Hey, we were fine. We didn't need you guys to rescue us." But that's how Shackleton got sent home.
So
Okay.
if nobody has any other questions, I will go ahead.
Oh, well, I put it in. If they wrote their diaries and then they died, how did we get their diaries? I mean, how did they? It feels like they got the cameras with the film and the diaries.
See, not everybody on the expedition died. There are a lot of men left. When Scott died with 4 other men, there were still other men in his party back at the base camp. And so when they found the bodies, they found the diaries and they found all sorts of, Scott kept writing even, day after day, they're stuck in the blizzard tent and he kept writing. So the documentation was really superb. They would tell you their thoughts, their feelings. They used to spend a tremendous amount of time at night thinking about food because, they were just stuck in the tents.
And water, did they melt snow?
Yeah, there was always water. And the other thing I didn't mention, meat, okay? They were always killing seals and penguins because they were close to the base.
Oh, seals. Oh, they had that.
Seals and penguins. And all things.
But they had to cook it, right? They cooked it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'd skin them and they'd get rid of the blubber and the fat and they'd cook them and they'd freeze them, because otherwise, you know, on the trail, I mean, it was, when you're gonna be gone for 2 years, you're pretty
Yeah.
judicious about what you do with your cupboard and your supplies. But the further inland you go, the less likelihood of finding any wildlife at all. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
What about their maps? How come they had such great maps if nobody was ever there? And how did they know how far the previous people had gone?
Scariest question of all, because I still don't understand exactly how they knew. The thing that's amazing to me is these guys knew where they were. They could take readings. They could, I've got to learn how they do. I should take a course in navigation. But I mean, when they knew that they were like 97 miles from the pole, it had to be based on something that they were confident of. And sure enough, their figures were correct.
How did they know the pole? How did anybody know this is the pole?
It's the magnetic, it's the pull of the magnetic field. It's, I don't know how, Martha, I'm not really sure. That's why
We
but
gotta find out.
yeah, well, I'll find out for the next one.
All right.
All righty.
Are there any other questions tonight? Otherwise, I'll thank everyone for coming and we'll see you at our next event. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Bob.
thank you. And